All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Jazz. I'm the social content strategist at Midwest Games, and we host the For the Love of Games events typically once a month with a variety of speakers on a variety of topics just to give people a space to ask questions and learn things about the industry that they might not find otherwise. And this month, we have Marina speaking, who is the CEO of Terra Translations and also just actually Terra Localization and also just the coolest person to exist. So we have a very great presentation coming up, and I'll pass it over to Marina to start.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jess. Thank you for having me. So a short introduction about me. I am an English to Spanish translator certified by the American Translators Association. And I started my career actually 2 decades ago. And one of the first projects that I worked on was a very popular AAA video game. And as an avid gamer, that project really sparked my passion for this area of specialization. And since then, I have helped localize hundreds of games from major titles to small indie games. And now I am CEO of Terra Localizations. And I am also an adjunct professor at NYU for audiovisual translation. As you may have noticed, I have an accent. I am originally from Argentina, but I currently live in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So I'm a Midwesterner. So today we're going to be covering the following points in the presentation. We're going to talk about an intro to the video game and localization industry. We're going to talk about what the difference is between localization, translation, what is culturalization, what content should you be looking to localize, how to choose your languages for your games, where in the world to press start, and then choosing your localization partner, and knowing what assets you need to send to your localization team. And finally, we'll end up with a summary. So let's get started. Right, so video games are a bigger business than ever, topping the movie industry and the music industry combined. Traditionally, games have been primarily developed in English or in Japanese, since the United States and Japan are the main game exporters. But let's take a look at where the gamer base is located according to revenue. So Asia Pacific is actually the biggest market, representing 46% of total revenues, followed by North America with 27%, Europe and the Middle East and Africa, 24%, and Latin America, yay, 5%. And an average of 45% of the sales of gaming companies comes from international sales. So you can imagine how important the role of localization is in this industry. And as the gaming industry grows globally, the need for localization grows too. And it is proven that gamers feel more comfortable when the content and the services are tailored to their unique personal needs, their market, their cultural background. And here is where localization comes into play. No pun intended there. Another interesting statistic is that over 66% of Steam users have languages other than English set as their primary language. This was presented by Steam at GDC this year. So you might be thinking, okay, sounds like localization is important, but what is the difference really? Do I need to translate? What's the difference between translation and localization really? All right, so whenever we talk about a good quality translation, we generally use adjectives such as it's precise, it's accurate, it's complete. But when we talk about localization, we mean a translation that is user-oriented and that often requires non-linguistic adaptations and also which seeks to resonate with the target audience. The main focus in video game localization is not to be faithful to an original text, but rather the entertainment of the users, the players. And here's where I would like to introduce this concept that when it comes to localization, the gamer comes first, and every decision that we make as localization professionals should be done always thinking about the person who will be playing the game. We want them to be entertained, to provide them with an immersive experience. So anything that interferes with that immersion and that gameplay should be avoided. And one important thing to keep in mind is that in video game localization, we are translating audiovisual content. So the text that we are translating, even if it seems out of context, can never be disassociated from what the players see and hear on screen. So video game localization entails adaptation of text, images, videos, sound, music, arts, and animations. And some of the language and cultural adaptations can include the things that you see here on screen, the numbers, the measurements, time formats, even colors. And not only these adaptations can be necessary, but also we need to take into account the target culture. So cultural adaptation can be necessary when pursuing a new market, and it can take place at two levels, the macro level and the micro level. Now, in the macro level, it can affect the overall design of the game, such as the game's mechanics, the graphics, the character designs, and even the storyline. And adaptation at the micro level refers to textual changes made to the in-game text, the script, the dialogues, and the text in the graphics. One of the best examples of cultural adaptation at a macro level is what happened to the video game Wolfenstein 2. German editions of Wolfenstein games changed Hitler's name and characteristic mustache and also replaced the swastikas. Germany is very strict about violence in gaming. This means that, for example, in Team Fortress 2, the characters won't explode into blood and guts. Instead, they blow up into sparks and metal and oil, as the game devs use this resource to prevent problems with the game in this market. An example of cultural adaptation at a micro level now is way easier to find. Probably the game that you're currently playing has gone through some adaptation to fit that market. And one fun cultural adaptation at a micro level are the translation of puns that and jokes that are found in Monkey Island. This game is considered yet today one of the best localization works ever among gamers in Spain. And in the example on the slide, the original was transcreated, so translated and created to something new. It says, the original says, llevarás mi espada como si fueras un pincho morundo, which in English means that you will carry my sword like a type of Spanish brochette or kebab. So as you can see, it's not just about translating, but about recreating that original intention. So in video games, the main goal of localization, we said, it's to entertain the players. And if the localized version of a game contains cultural oddities, elements that can be difficult to understand or can be offensive to target players, or even affect the gameplay experience, this in turn is likely to hinder their immersion and may also contribute to the lack of commercial success of the game in a target market. And this is brilliantly illustrated in this image by Josue Pereira, who kindly let me use this image for my presentations. So thank you, Josue. But this shows in a humorous way how each region or country may want to adapt a game. Each culture has its own interests and aspects that stand out to them. And we must take these things into account when we are localizing. And on the topic of cultural adaptation, I would like to share a little bit about a strategy that is more and more being used in games, which is culturalization. Culturalization means that sometimes for a game to be successful in other regions, you need to incorporate the end gamer's culture. Any elements that define a culture could be taken into account, like history, religion, geography, food, even the way that people interact with each other. You can include those elements in the design, in the artwork, in features of your game to capture that local spirit and feel and make it more relatable to your audience. And the first step in defining a culturalization strategy is to study the markets where your game will be available. This will allow you to better understand the culture, the values, the traditions, the preferences of your potential players. You can choose to apply a reactive culturalization, so adapting and modifying game content in response to potential or actual cultural sensitivities. Or you can choose to have a proactive approach to culturalization. So intentionally incorporating cultural elements to better connect with a specific audience or market. Our language defines the way that we see the world and that we interact with it. So culturalization takes all these factors into account when translating the original message, not only into different languages, but also in adapting it and making it suitable for each type of audience. Localization companies can act as consultants in this process. If a game takes place in a country or a specific historical moment, you don't want to offend anyone or make mistakes that may be very important within a cultural context. Think of game sagas like Civilization or Age of Empires. These types of games simply would not make any sense if they did not take into account all these factors that you see on screen. Faith and religion is one of the main aspects to consider. This is and always has been a sensitive topic, so it's good to keep it in mind if when you're in the dev process. Take this example from the very first Final Fantasy game. In the original Final Fantasy game, you had to revive a fallen party member by visiting a church. This was changed into a clinic in the localized release. The building's appearance was changed on the outside too, and the priest on the inside was changed to a generic, non-religious character. The associated text was changed as well. Even the text about reviving a fallen character's soul was changed. Legislation around content in video games varies significant by country. In Russia, depictions of alcohol, drug, and religious insults are banned. China prohibits violence, murder, skeletons, and undead creatures. They are seen as disrespectful to the dead. Japan bans graphic violence like blood and dismemberment, often requiring visual modifications. Germany restricts blood and World War II imagery, including swastikas, leading to altered characters and censored scenes. So developers must adapt the game according to comply with local laws. Now, when it comes to politics and history, you certainly have to be cautious and avoid including elements that may be offensive to some people. Take the game Mother 2 Earthbound, for example. First, the cultists in Happy Happy Village were given a graphical makeover for the English localization to avoid comparisons with the KKK. So the town 3K, Threek, was named to Threed for the English localization, since the American audience might read Threek and see it as 3K, right? So as you can see, localization happens for the US market as well. As far as cultural traditions go, again, the US is no exception. So on this slide, you can see Lenora, a dark-skinned character in the Pokemon series. And in the Japanese version, there is no major concern with her clothing. But for American audiences, seeing a dark-skinned girl wearing an apron in a context that doesn't call for an apron was something that might have a negative connotation for playing into all stereotypes. So they localize her outfit to something more neutral. And also one peculiar thing that happens in Japan is that Japanese law forbids four-finger characters. So you will see characters like a Crash here or even Bart Simpson with realistic human hands. So why should indie devs care about localization? All right, so the belief that localization is key to maximizing revenue is already widely accepted. But how many of you still aren't quite sure if it's worth it? How many of you think that you should only localize a game once it has been proven to be successful, right, in a specific market? I know it can be hard to justify the decision to localize your game without having access to actual sales numbers, seeing where your players are from. And that is why we always suggest you think of localization as part of your marketing strategy. So as an opportunity to access new markets and not just an expense. Did you know that if you are working on a mobile game, localizing it can have a direct impact on getting it featured on the App Store? Many people will say that the US mobile game market is tough at the moment. It's really hard for an indie project to thrive there, with so many big studios competing with each other for the top of the charts. And this is why you shouldn't underestimate regional markets that are in need of good quality content available in their language. There's a real demand for localized games in apps there. And in case you're wondering on a PC game, let me tell you that if you localize your game, you increase the chances of more people including it in their wish list and also buying it. Non-English speakers likely won't buy a game that is not localized into their native language. So this brings us to one of the main questions that we start as we start to plan a localization strategy. And here we want to share with you the top 5 languages to target for PC and for mobile games. Let's start with the top 5 languages to localize for PC games. No wonder Chinese ranks first. China's video game industry is the world's biggest. Did you know that 1 in 5 of Steam users have Chinese as their primary language? Most of them prefer simplified Chinese, which is the variant spoken in mainland China, while traditional Chinese, another variant, is spoken in Hong Kong and Taiwan. Russian comes second, though it's actually the third largest language on Steam, after Chinese and English. Almost 12% of Steam gamers have Russian as their native language. Over 5% of Steam gamers have their computers set to European Spanish. The Spanish gaming market was the top 10 globally, generating over 2 billion in game revenue. There are 300 million people around the world whose native language is Spanish. It is widely spoken in 22 countries, 4 continents, including the US, which has about 30 million native Spanish speakers. However, not all of these 300 million speakers speak the same kind of Spanish. There are many different dialects of Spanish, which can result in differences in grammar, in vocabulary, and accents. About 4.4% of Steam gamers are native in Portuguese, with the vast majority coming from Brazil. About 1/3 of Brazilian gamers have PC as their favorite means of gaming. And German is the 5th largest language on Steam, home to 34 million active gamers. Germany is Europe's largest gaming market and has seen a greater surge of online gamers than any other European country. Now let's move on to the top 5 languages in mobile games. This year, mobile games counted for nearly 3/4 of the sector's total revenue, ranking in almost 10 billion. China makes up for more than 25% of the world's mobile game market and rising, which absolutely deserves attention of gaming companies worldwide. Although the regulations can be challenging, if a company is dedicated to developing a hit game that fits the rules and the cultural gaming preferences, there is a strong chance that the effort will pay off in China. China is ranked number 1 in the iOS App Store, listing the terms of downloads ahead of the US. Google Play has historically had more downloads than iOS, but iOS, on the other hand, has higher revenue. The growth of iOS in China has had a large impact on the iOS app market overall. Google Play is actually banned in mainland China. And as a result, many local Android app stores have emerged, such as the Tencent My App, 360 Mobile Assistant, and others. Now, this one might come as a surprise, but India is a very interesting emerging market, with Hindi being their largest language. It has become one of the fastest growing mobile markets in the world, with smartphone usage at an all-time high and with constant new technological improvements. In many areas, mobile gaming has never been so convenient and so affordable for users there. Brazil is, after India and the US, the 3rd largest country in terms of mobile downloads. Only 5% of Brazilians speak English. So localization into Brazilian Portuguese is really essential if you want your game to succeed in this market. Indonesia, with 280 million people, is the 4th most populated country in the world. And it generates over 1.1 billion in game revenue annually, which makes it one of the largest game markets for Southeast Asia. And mobile is the dominant gaming platform there. And our number 5, we have Russian. There are over 70 million active gamers in Russia, as some 40 million of these are avid consumers of mobile gaming apps. Okay, you have identified a lot of global potential for your game. Where do you start? So to ensure localization success, start planning early in the development. Focus on key languages based on data, like store traffic and community feedback, and also consider releasing additional languages as updates with proper announcements. Remember, most platforms favor localized games, and language support is based on in-game settings, not just the store page. So avoid also linking language solely to geography because player preferences can vary widely. For example, I'm based here in the US, but I have it set up with Latin American Spanish as my main language. Assess the complexity of your game's content to choose the right localization partner. I'll talk more about this soon. And also define your outsourcing strategy and assign a clear point of contact to coordinate between the dev team and the localization team. Also determine your scope. You don't have to go for all the languages at once. You can do it in stages. You can go for a minimum app store, keywords, and screenshots. Second stage is what you call a partial localization, which implies in-game text and subtitling. And the final stage will be to go on full localization, which will include all of the above, but also audio files. So we suggest starting small and building up from there. Keep it simple. Track all the text in your game, both in the scene views and what is left hard-coded in the scripts. Then the good old Excel sheets, keep all the text in an Excel spreadsheet with one segment or string per cell and one column per language. Having all the content in one single document will make it easier for you to implement the localized versions into the build. This same process should be implemented for store descriptions and marketing material. Make all in-game text boxes, windows, interface spacious. When text is translated from one language to another, the length of the source and the translated text is likely to be different. Bear in mind also the font that you will use for your game. If you plan on localizing your game into multiple languages, you definitely want to look at the character palette for the typeface to double check that it has language support. And when selecting a market to bring a game into, a game developer publisher should also consider many different aspects. These include, but are not limited to, some platforms being more popular in selected country or region. For example, the primary markets for console games are USA, Japan, and the Western Europe. Size of the audience in dominant language markets for your type of game. The cultural norms and features, as well as censorship restrictions in the target market. The success of previous games in those specific markets. You should also consider the income per capita for purchase ability. And of course, legal matters like personal data processing regulations, which differ from country to country. Now, understanding who your local audience is will be the cornerstone of any solid localization strategy. This understanding must include everything that drives your customers' purchasing behaviors, as well as everything that worries them. Here we go. So in trying to help game developers make smart and also informed decisions for localization investment, my company has actually developed a game localization return on investment calculator. So it's a data-driven approach to like sort of simulate the market behavior, taking advantage of predictive models based on market research, hands-on experience from localization projects, and innovation initiatives. And the model combines external market intelligence with also internal business data to provide sort of a holistic view of the industry landscape. And also it's a guide for making strategic decisions on which markets to enter, which languages to prioritize, and helping maximize revenue through localization planning. And the calculator also enables to have a detailed analysis of individual games, taking into account their specific characteristics. It also allows for cross-comparison between countries and localized languages. So it offers like a valuable insight into market performance using those user preferences. Feel free to reach out to me if you want to talk about this. This is a tool that we developed to help our clients and to help potential clients and help indie game developers. We do not sell this. So just for you to know. So if you want to reach out to me, if you're interested in a specific market and we can help you sort of figure out if it makes sense or not, just reach out to me. All right, now let's move on to another topic, which is choosing Who will go on the localization journey with you? This is a very important decision. Who will be your sidekick in this quest? So far we haven't defined who or what the localization team is. So let's do that now. When we talk about the localization team, we are referring to the person, team, or teams responsible for carrying out all the work needed to properly localize your video game. The size of this team will vary depending on the scope, the stage of the project. It can include freelance translators, it can include language service providers, or even internal localization teams. Again, depending on your budget, the scope of your game, you might choose to localize it by hiring directly freelance translators in specific languages, hiring testers to help you with the task, or also use a localization company to centralize all that work, or even create, again, internal localization teams. What you need to keep in mind if you decide to hire an external localization team is that sharing the same vision for your game is very important. They will accompany you throughout the entire localization process and even during game development. And it can really help you to consider factors that you might not have, thought of early on. That's why it's really important to share that same philosophy and feel that they're part of your team. And here are a few small steps that you can take to get started and help them be successful too. So let's take a look at some of them. Make sure that the font that you're using for your game is compatible with all alphabets and the diacritical marks as well. So languages like Russian, Chinese, many others will require special characters. And as you can see on the screen, the code got corrupted in this game and the text did too, something that could have been flagged with testing, which apparently didn't happen here, unfortunately. It's also important to keep in mind that some languages, such as Arabic, are written from right to left. This is a basic but critical consideration in localization if you want to reach the Arabic-speaking market. Beyond just translating the text right to left, languages require also UI mirroring, meaning that the entire interface, including the menus, navigation elements, icon, even the character alignment, needs to be flipped to match reading flow. And if this isn't handled properly, the game can feel very awkward or even unusable for native speakers of Arabic. Expandable text boxes are the way to go because, again, as I said, most languages are longer than English, some 30%, even to 40% longer. So it is not always possible to limit the character count and still convey the message effectively if we have really, really small spaces. Make sure that you make available subtitles for the deaf and the hard of hearing. They're the most comprehensive form of subtitles. They include also nonverbal sounds that contribute to the viewing experience. For example, they may transcribe ambient sounds that help convey nonverbal context. This allows players to understand noises happening off screen and also enables deaf or hard of hearing viewers to fully grasp what's going on in the game. And these types of subtitles can also be made available for foreign language players who are deaf or hard of hearing. Regarding tools needed for video game localization, the most common method for sharing your content to your localization team is through Excel files, which should include as much context as possible, such as who's speaking, if it's a dialogue, the situation, tone, so that translators can work accurately. It is also crucial to have a shared repository with version control and unique IDs for each line to streamline communication between the translators and the testers, especially when reporting or resolving bugs. Now, to ensure effective localization, developers should also provide or hire specialists to create a style guide for the project that outlines the tone, the language preferences, the target audiences, and the lore of your game. This document allows the localization team to stay aligned with the game's vision and to adapt it appropriately for global markets. Also, glossaries are essential in localization because they ensure that we have a consistent translation of key terms across a project. They are especially critical in games with complex lore, invented terminology. They are really vital when multiple translators are involved so that you avoid inconsistencies. It can also be updated throughout the project. So make sure that your localization team employs a good terminology management tool and strategy. And to show you just how important glossaries are, I have a very simple example on the screen. This is a real case that we encounter while localizing a AAA video game. I cannot say the name of the game for confidentiality reasons, so we're calling it the boat case. And we've borrowed a few random images from the internet. But as you can see, the English term boat can be used for practically anything that floats and sails in the sea. But in Spanish, each variation requires a different word. Oh my gosh, the camera decided to like really zoom in on me. Sorry about that. It was like for effect. So as you can see, the English term boat used for practically anything, and for Spanish, we needed to adapt it. But not all Spanish refer to that term in the same way. For example, I'm from Argentina, but someone who speaks Spanish from another part of the world may use different words to refer to these boats. For example, Viking ship in Spain would be called dracar, but someone in South America would call it barco vikingo. Then in Spanish, those colonial era ships with large sails, they are called veleros, but in Latin America, they are referred to as barcos de vela. So very different terminology. I hope this helps you understand the importance of having a good glossary when localizing a game to different languages. And yes, even a great style guide and a great glossary, the translators might still need more context in order to translate accurately. And this is where the queries become very important. These are questions that the translator or the localization team might have that are usually directed to the developers, who are the only ones with the complete information. And they're usually shared through Excel files or shared documents and that are accessible to all team members. And it is essential that developers respond to these queries promptly with clear, concise answers, providing more references, so that that will benefit a lot the accuracy of the localization. And after this long process we've been discussing, we finally reached the testing phase. The way testers communicate with the localization team is through bug reports. And in these reports, the testers identify an error, they classify it, they provide steps to reproduce it and solve it. So it's possible that linguists may not always agree with the tester's judgment on what is a linguistic error. So there should be some room for discussion, ideally. And once the issue is resolved, developers can implement and fix it in the game, and everyone's happy, hopefully. The good news is that the more context your localization team has, the fewer errors tester will need to report. So this saves time and money and improves the overall quality of the localized project. A win for everyone. Before I wrap up this presentation, I would like to summarize what we talked about today. So keep the localization in mind from the early development stages. Know your audience as well as you know your product. Determine your scope. Set realistic goals in terms of localization. Communication is key, so talk to your entire team about what you've learned here today. Localization is built as a team. And remember, it is a market enabler. It makes your game accessible, approachable, understandable to a larger number of potential players. Localization, I like to say, when used strategically and managed well, is not a cost, but a revenue multiplier. We've reached the end of the presentation. Mission accomplished, achievement unlocked. If you would like to also stay in touch with me, you can contact me directly via email. You can also scan this code on your phone if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn. Hope you enjoyed the presentation. I would be happy to answer any questions that you might have now. And yeah, I'll open it to Jazz. Thank you, Jazz.
Great, Marina, thank you so much. That was so informative. It's really eye-opening how much goes into localizing games behind the scenes that as a consumer you don't always think about or just notice in games, which I guess if you don't notice it, it's a good sign. That means that you're doing your job. So,
That's a job well done.
yep, exactly. So we've had a few questions in the chat, and if anyone has any questions, this is a good time to think on them and put them in the chat as we answer these first few. But one that we got was, as an AV translator and localizer, how do you handle the potential absence of visual references?
Okay, this is where the query management is very important because you will need a visual reference sometimes in order to provide an accurate translation if there isn't enough context in the string information, right? Like you're translating a dialogue, you need to know, okay, who's speaking? Who am I speaking to? Is it one person, two people? Like we need where are they? You know, like everything is like really, really important. And even for translating some terminology, it's super important to know what are we referring to. Like if you have a word, like a random word without context, says deck. What is it? Is it a ship deck? Or are we talking about cards, play card deck? Like I need to know what am I, what am I localizing because can mean so many different things, right? So context is very important. And the way you deal with this is ideally you will get some reference images already directly from the developers, maybe a demo of the game, a gameplay of the game, videos to reference, or even just screenshots. Sometimes just even a screenshot you will ask the developer, can you send a screenshot of what this term is? And once you see it, you will ideally realize what you're localizing. But yes, it's extremely important to provide an accurate localization, so to say.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Another question that came up as you were talking about how important it is to do research and learn about the data before as you were working on your game, was, are the places where I can go and get broad overviews of cultural distinctions to find out what to research more? Sorry, where are the places you can go to get this data and information?
Yeah, there are statistics out there that you can take into account. You can use Steam as a like if it's a PC game, Steam is a great place. There are other really reliable research out there for with Newzoo, for example, Gamealytics. So you could look into there. There isn't one particularly tailored to localization. That's why my team came up with this idea of how can we help our clients or potential clients in making smart decisions? Like we want them to succeed, right? We don't just want them to localize for the sake of localizing, because we want them to be successful in that market and continue making games. So sort of out of an interest in helping our clients is that we develop this calculator, and I showed a little bit, but it takes like the market research, it takes the data from Steam and sources of that nature, and also our internal information of cost, of how much things cost and the like, and it produces a sort of a better idea of, okay, will this game in this genre, in this platform, be successful in a certain market or not.
Yeah, that's amazing that Tara has put together a tool like that because it can really help when you don't
Yeah,
even know
and
where to
again,
start.
I'm not selling the tool at all because we don't charge for this. But if you are interested and it helps you, you know, and if we can help bring more data, you know, it's a win-win because you know you can be successful there and we can help out too. So
Yeah, that's great. All right, another question, and you probably don't know the exact percentage off the top of your head, but the question was, what is the percentage of international devs? So, for example, in Latin America, that produce content in their native language and then localize to other markets, such as English, compared to those who just write their content in English?
that is a really good question, and there still are developers that will or like develop in their original language and then translate it into English, and then from there from everywhere else. Usually that is the way to go. Instead of say they're developing the game in Brazilian Portuguese and they have to go from Brazilian Portuguese into all of these other languages, it's much harder to find linguists and specialists that will do Brazilian Portuguese into Korean, Brazilian Portuguese into Russian than it is to find English into Russian. English into Korean. So usually game developers will not always, but in many cases, they will revert to having the localization into English. Also, many developers do write the game in English, even though that's not their original language. And we see this a lot in indie game devs, certainly from Latin America. They want to be successful internationally. They know English should be like the main language, and from there you go to all the other languages as well. Just as I was saying, so so that can happen too. But usually in those cases, also what we advise the devs is to have a native English speaker review this work, because especially if not only if you want to be successful in English speaking countries, it's going to be really important that you have a good version that is understandable, that it flows naturally, that doesn't have any errors. But also, if you're localizing and you have a source text that is flawed, yeah, everything else might be flawed too. So this is like a triple effect, you know. So, so it makes sense to have a really good source, English source, if you're going to localize from there. Yeah, because all the other languages will, you know, be basing their localized versions out of that. Yeah, but I see a lot. I see a lot of game devs that will write it in English, even though that's not their original language. But others that choose to just do it in their language and then hire a professional to do the translation.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Another question we had was, what languages have character length concerns? There were some answers in the chat. German was mentioned.
Oh,
I
yes,
believe
German's one of the ones that are, yeah,
French was mentioned and
French.
also Brazilian Portuguese. But are there any others?
Spanish as well. Spanish above 30%. Yeah, it's very sometimes when I want to illustrate it to people, I take the Harry Potter books, and you can take like the Harry Potter book in English and then show the versions in other languages, and they're like significantly bigger in yeah. Yeah, it's the a lot of languages are a lot longer than English.
Okay, great. And then this one's a personal question from Alyssa asking, what got you into localization and did you set out for this position?
That's a good question. Oh my goodness. Um, Well, I studied to be a translator, and my mother is a translator, so I sort of followed her steps in my studies. I didn't think I was going to be doing this at all, because I certainly didn't see any trace of game localization in my formal translation academic studies. This is sort of something I stumbled upon by chance, doing this AAA project that I mentioned when I introduced myself. I was hired to do this project, sort of realized that this was a world, that game localization existed. I've always been I've always loved games, so it felt like such a good fit for me, and I became so passionate about this. Not only because I love games, but also because I love languages, I love different cultures, and being able to like combine those two passions into this, and also sort of help the world of gaming thrive globally, like became sort of like one of my passions, and I continued since then, like now 2 decades doing this.
Well, you're very good at it. So,
Thank you.
um,
It's all about the passion, I'm telling you
yeah.
guys.
And then we had another question, more personally themed. But do you have any advice for someone trying to break into the industry as a games translator? And what kind of things should one look to have in a portfolio?
Yes, I have tons of advice for this, and you can, whoever wrote, you can reach out to me. I can give you a list of like resources and things I have prepared, because I get asked about this a lot. But one of the things that are very important is to find a community, your community, and little by little, just like you said, build your portfolio. And this can be very difficult if you're starting out and you don't have anything in your portfolio, because people will it might be hard to get that first opportunity, that right, that gets your foot in the door. So one way you can do this is by helping out perhaps indie game developers. Maybe you play an indie game that you love, it's not translated into your language, and you can reach out to them and be like, hey, would you want me to translate it? And then I can have you in my portfolio. So sort of a trade-off, right? And again, I recommend doing this only with like indie game developers. Certainly would not go to a AAA studio to offer this. Not only will they not answer the door, but it won't work like that. But there's still some game devs that use some crowdsourcing. This is a little obviously controversial. Professional translators really frown upon this, but there's still some that do this, and it could be a good way to sort of gain experience and get some contacts. Again, sometimes it can be tricky because if it's not done by professionals, maybe they're not using the right tools, the result is not the best, so maybe you don't want to be referring your work to that. So it's kind of like a tricky situation. I like more that idea of like helping out an indie game developer open up this new market, and also they help you by providing that reference sort of and that portfolio, and that will help you out a lot. Then there are a lot of communities also out there that you can join, Discord servers, LinkedIn and Facebook groups. There are many like communities of game translators out there that you can join and sort of learn from them as well. And also nowadays you find all sorts of like webinars, podcasts, books on the subject. So there's just a lot of information out there. I've done many webinars on this topic of career development in game localization. Happy to share those links as well. So just take advantage of what's out there that's like free content that can really help you.
Yeah, like this, for example, everyone who's already here, you're one step closer. And then we had another advice question, but this one's a little more specific for someone who has a background as a localization manager for large companies, but wants to shift towards freelancing as a localization consultant. So, what
Mhm.
advice would you have for someone in that situation?
Mhm. Well, certainly that's a great experience that you have because that can be valuable both as for vendors, but also for clients, right? So you have that dual perspective of having worked, hired vendors, managed projects, understand what's going on the game development or publisher side. So that's really valuable content already. So I guess my advice would be to start sharing some of that value, not for free, but like in a way that it contributes to the industry. So, for example, offering to present, offering to be interviewed. Um, there are so many associations, conferences, events that are happening that you could perhaps contribute and get your name out there and network. Because really, not only by working as a consultant, but with any work, I think I'm a big believer in that your network is very, very important. So, any opportunity you get to, for example, volunteer in associations, organizations that you believe in, can be a really good way also of building that network. I'm telling you, I go to many conferences and events per year, and the best the best connections I have made are from organizations where I volunteer. So I don't just go to the conference and attend and watch the talks, right? Like I'm actually a volunteer there. So I put time in helping organize. I put time as being one of the boards organizing, and I make and other I see other like-minded people there as well. And eventually, I know them. They've seen me work. They've seen me volunteer, put in hours to help a certain cause, and those have ended up being amazing connections. I have hired people from this. I have gotten clients out of this. And in my experience, almost like I always say, like kind of life is like a boomerang. Like you put out there, it comes back. And in that sense, I'm a real believer in contributing to helping other people, maybe people that are starting out, contributing, helping your industry as a whole by volunteering in associations and organizations, and just just giving to receive eventually.
Yeah, and I mean that's great advice for just any career or area of just how important networking, building authentic connections, and just helping people are because you never know who you're going to meet at an event or a conference that you go to. So, yeah, that's great advice,
You
Maria.
never know. And you always have to approach networking. This is a really good advice that was one given. You always approach networking in what can I do for this person? Like, how can I help this person that's talking to me? Instead of how can this person help me? You know what I mean? And if you approach networking in that selfless way, oh my gosh, people like perceive it right away and you create authentic connections. Like you're actually trying to help someone, they will remember. And again, the industry is like big, but it's also small. And I've encountered so many cases where, someone was my client, then I was their client. Someone used to give me work, then I was giving them work, then I was providing referrals to them. Like this is what happens. So networking in that selfless way and like really trying to help people will help you in the long run. It really will.
Yeah, absolutely. And then another question that we got, which is our last one as of now, unless anyone else thinks of something else, but it is, what is your one of your favorite instances where you took a source and made it amazing in a translated version?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, okay. This I have so many examples. Gosh, but I'm going to tell you, video game localization can prepare you for anything. If you are a translator, like you never know if you're going to be translating a technical manual or a truck simulator one day, and the next day you're translating this like fantastic dialogue in this like fantasy world. It has nothing to do with what you were doing yesterday. It's like it's so varied because game genres are so varied and game universe are so varied. So that is to say, there is one instance that I still remember, and this was so many years ago, but the game was all rhymes. They were all rhymes, and they were written in a like poetic way. So, in order to translate this into Spanish, that was my less lucrative project ever because I spent like, I don't know how many days translating this like really reduced number of words. I was so proud of the result. Again, not profitable at all because usually you're paid by the word or by the hour. So, like, if you're putting, say, 3 hours in one sentence, not profitable for a translator. But again, this was a project that was dear to my heart because I did pour my heart and soul into it, and I was really happy with how I transcreated that content. And this concept of transcreation I really like, and it really applies to video game localization, which is like you're translating, but you're also creating. You're adapting something new. You're creating something new because sometimes literal word for word translation really don't doesn't go right. You have to adapt, you have to create something new. Okay, what's the intention, what is the original trying to do, and you create that intention, that emotion in the new language, so you're transcreating that concept. And that was one game that I remember being extremely challenging but also incredibly rewarding once I like felt that I nailed all the rhymes. It was fun.
Yeah, that sounds like a fun project. Now I'm trying to imagine like the translators behind like Dr. Seuss books, what what their work must look like.
Totally.
Yeah, but that was all the questions that we had. So I just want to give a huge thank you, Marina, for coming out here today and just giving an amazing presentation covering on all the topics, answering so many questions. This was super helpful. I learned a lot. I do learn a lot every time I talk to you, but I learned even more today. So thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who came to attend. We appreciate you being here. We host these typically once a month. And if you want to stay on top of them or join future events and learn about another topic in the games industry, I threw our Discord link in the chat if you're not in there already. And you can also just put any questions in there for Midwest Games as a publisher. And then also, like Marina said, you can email her with questions and reach out to her on LinkedIn. So thank you again, everyone, for being here. And again, Marina, thank you.
Thank you all for listening and staying around and all the questions. And thank you, Jazz. This was so fun. I appreciate
Thank
it.
you. Bye, everyone.
Bye bye.